Welcome back to another episode of Fireside Chat with the Naturopath, brought to you by Health Buddha, a digital media company whose mission is to increase the awareness and adoption of natural and healthy lifestyle. I am your host, Dr. Christina, Avila, naturopath and certified diabetes educator, and our topic today is the journey of conception. Our guest today is Dr. Jodie Peacock, a naturopath practicing at the Root of Health in Oakville. She is the founder of the Canadian Fertility Show, Chief Medical Officer for Enhanced Fertility and NFH, and the author of Preconceived. She's passionate about supporting couples on their journey to parenthood. Welcome, Dr. Jodie.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
This journey is quite different for everybody. Often simple for some and quite difficult for others. And so why don't we start off the conversation with what are the common issues couples face when they are trying to conceive?
Absolutely. So, I would say the conversation in my mind, like this conversation should start before someone's having trouble trying to conceive, which is kind of part of the reason why I've put out the book Preconceived. Like I want people to start having the conversation, okay, we're going to think about trying to have a baby in that kind of 3 to 6 months before they start trying. That's when we really want to start focusing on, are we, does either party have any issues with nutrient depletions, for example, because that can be a big reason why either you don't get pregnant or it can be a result, it can end in an early pregnancy loss, which obviously is devastating for someone. So, starting that conversation early with, looking at those things, other lifestyle factors play a huge role. And this is, it's a time where I find from kind of the traditional medical system, there's really not a lot of guidance or education given to couples. Like typically I'll find most of my female patients, if they go and see their GP and say, we're going to think about starting a family, the common recommendation is, okay, stop the birth control pill, start some folic acid, and off you go. Yeah, so because there really isn't a lot of education given around that, section of health for people, I think it's such an important role that naturopaths can play with their patients in practice, because that time leading up into your pregnancy is the most important time when we're looking at the health of kind of the women's egg, male sperm. This is the optimal time where we can get those kind of gametes as healthy as possible and then have an end result of a healthier baby. One of the big things that got me kind of started on this journey in the fertility realm was a stat that came out, I guess it came out about 5 years ago, that the current generation of children being born are the first in human history that aren't expected to have a longer life expectancy than their parents. And so as naturopathic doctors, like that's a terrifying statistic. Like we are so focused in proactive and preventative medicine to see, the health of our generations getting worse. It's really not, it's not a good stat to be able to tell people, right? So I really want to be part of the conversation of let's change that.
So when it does come to, people having the conversation of conception, what are the common misconceptions that you often hear about in your practice?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, one of the first things I really like to help educate patients on, like for our female patients, is just their actual cycle, like what is happening in their menstrual cycle. Because even though, we go through health class, most of it is always just focused on how do we avoid getting pregnant, right? Like how do we stop that from happening? Outside of that, a lot of women have no idea what's happening in their reproductive system, right? And so it's like we spend our teens, our 20s just avoiding getting pregnant as much. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm ready to have a baby. And I have really no idea how to do that.
Right.
So, it's having that first conversation of, how do we track our cycle? What does ovulation look like? Are you actually ovulating? Because obviously if you're not ovulating, pregnancy is going to be very challenging, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of changing, when couples are having intercourse and then they can get pregnant, right? Like that's obviously a pretty simple solution, but not something that should be overlooked, right? Then, other misnomers are, things like, oh, my lifestyle has nothing to do with me being able to get pregnant. I can keep drinking until I know I'm pregnant, or, once I get pregnant, then I'll stop smoking, or, whatever the case is. Those, toxins coming into the body play a huge role in the health of both sperm and egg. So this is not just a female comment, right? So that's also something I often will find, one partner is very committed to, making lifestyle changes and doing everything they can to get healthy. And the other partner is, still going out drinking regularly, smoking, using marijuana, not changing their diet. And that's going to play a big role in the health of both the egg and the sperm. And, often we'll see that kind of trend more to the male partner, but we can see it the other way. And then, in same-sex relationships, obviously that's a little bit different. But even there, when I'm working with, say I have two females and only one is looking to get pregnant, obviously, I still will encourage both to, make the lifestyle changes, commit to it together. So then they're still getting that bonding, they're still getting that together time, which I think is really important.
Yeah, the support essentially is what it comes down to. You had mentioned things right off the top of our conversation with nutritional deficiencies as something that you want to identify quite early on. When it does come to contributing factors to possibly decrease someone's likelihood of conception, what are the things that you are often flagging in that process?
Yeah, so definitely some of our B vitamins play a big role here. So obviously most people have heard about folic acid. So folic acid is actually a synthetic version of the B9 vitamin folate. And in our bodies, basically, folate gets converted into what's called our active form of folate, which is, it's a very long word, 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. We short form it into 5-MTHFR. But the MTHFR version of folate is the actual one that is active in, helping with DNA replication, helping ensure, so when baby first starts to develop, their nervous system develops and their neural tube develops, and that's where folic acid is so important. But there is about 20% of the population that basically has a genetic defect that doesn't allow them to take synthetic folic acid and metabolize it into that active form. So if, I'm working with patients and they're not aware of their genetic status on that particular gene, I will always recommend they supplement with active folate, or, making sure their prenatal has 5-MTHFR instead of folic acid. And this is something that I think, not everybody is aware of, and especially, when the recommendations from, their family doctor, maybe just take a folic acid, it doesn't matter which one, we're all good. Right. That's a really important conversation to have, especially for patients that have been struggling to get pregnant or having recurrent miscarriage, because that's often a genetic anomaly that we will see come up in that population base. So that's one that's really important. Making sure their B12 is in a good range is also really important. Now, the range when you run blood work is quite wide on B12. And again, when we talk about B12, it's really important for that DNA replication. So where that's relevant is basically, as your egg develops, you need it to replicate in a healthy way. And if it doesn't, that's when you can have basically anomalies in a potential embryo and end up not being able to conceive. So with B12, again, there can be, more active forms. Methylcobalamin is typically the form that we'll look at when we're looking at our prenatal to make sure that it's going to be absorbed and utilized well. Also, there's been a big trend dietary-wise towards more vegan and vegetarian eating. And we know if you are eating that style, you're not getting B12 in your diet. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be particularly important for those patients that have chosen, to eat either a vegan or vegetarian diet. Iron is another big one when it comes more to the female side. If you're deficient in iron, it basically, like, essentially your body can give messaging that, you know, you're not able to carry a healthy pregnancy, so then you don't get pregnant.
Mhm.
So making sure that, you know, iron is in a good range is really important. And again, for our vegan and vegetarian patients, it can be more challenging to get enough iron in their diet. So it is something they really have to focus on up leveling and making sure they're getting enough nutrients into the diet, because the vegetarian sources don't absorb quite as easily as our animal-based iron sources. But even, you know, women that are eating meat can often be deficient as well. So it is an important conversation to be having. And then probably vitamin D would be the last one that I think from a basic kind of nutrient standpoint is really important. There has been multiple studies showing, you know, both sides, like women and men that are low in vitamin D will have a more challenging time getting pregnant and with staying or maintaining a pregnancy.
In the ideal world, if you could see a couple and be able to set them up for success, when would you like to sort of have them sitting with you, and when should they really start to be thinking about adopting a lot of, you know, the nutritional and lifestyle practices?
I mean, obviously, as naturopaths, we would like people to do this on an ongoing basis, you know, but when we're talking specifically about conception, typically, I'd love to see patients kind of 6 months, somewhere in that kind of 3 to 6 months before they want to start trying, so we can, you know, make sure hormones are processing and balanced well. You know, we can optimize, again, that egg and sperm quality. It takes about 3 months from when kind of the primordial follicle, which is basically kind of the baby of your egg, before it starts to develop and ovulate. It takes about 3 months. From when a sperm first starts to develop until it ejaculates from the body, it also is about 3 months. So that 3-month window before conception is really like the most critical, I would say. But obviously, if we can start making some of those changes before we hit that 3-month window, that would be ideal for patients' overall long-term health, right?
And what are the most common practices when it does come to nutrition and lifestyle? I mean, you mentioned sort of the alcohol side of things, you know, fruits and veggies. What other things are you sort of, you know, kind of putting on the table when you are talking to couples as they are on this start of the journey?
So some of it will be a little bit more individualized depending on, you know, what's going on for a patient. If they have any reproductive concerns, say they've been diagnosed with endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome, you know, we will have different nutritional recommendations depending. But, you know, as a kind of a general overall, if you're kind of just looking to up level your regular health, generally we look at kind of a modified Mediterranean style diet. So lots of lean protein, making sure you're getting enough protein in the diet. I find that can be quite hit and miss for patients, and making sure you're getting enough healthy fats. Now, you know, obviously there has been over the last few years a little bit of a trend towards the ketogenic diet as well. The ketogenic diet is fairly extreme when we look at kind of taking out almost all carbohydrates. So generally, you know, what the research shows is having a reasonable balance in your macronutrients is going to be the most optimal for conception. Now, there could be individual variation in that with patients if they have a particular health concern, but I tend to really steer people away from extreme diets and just say, okay, let's make sure we're getting, you know, our healthy fats in, we're getting enough protein, we're getting some complex carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are not the enemy, right? We have 3 macros, we need them all. And then just really eating, you know, whole real food. So staying away from the packaged processed stuff as much as we can, you know, keeping sugars, you know, anything that we would kind of class as unhealthy. We want to try to keep those kind of lower in the diet. Now, you don't have to be neurotic and never have a treat ever. You know, I want people to enjoy themselves as well, but I try to teach people to live kind of by the 80-20 rule. So if 80% of the time you're hitting, you know, getting those healthy things in, the other 20% is when you know, perhaps have a beer on a Friday night or a glass of wine, or you eat the cake or whatever your vice is.
For people who are on the journey and maybe have never even really considered consulting a naturopath, maybe don't even know what naturopaths do, when would you say that this might be a conversation as to a health care professional they'd want to integrate into their team, and what can they expect in terms of the support that a naturopath can offer?
Yeah, so again, I would say, if someone has never seen a naturopath and they're thinking about starting a family, I think that would be an optimal time to go in. And again, just to get a baseline, you can run some basic blood levels, make sure, you don't have any nutrient depletions. That's easy blood work to run. And get some support on, what lifestyle changes are going to be the most important. Because some people come in and their diets are great, but they never exercise, or their stress levels are through the roof, or like everyone is individual. So the amazing thing about going to see a naturopath is they're going to sit down and talk to you and get a really good idea about what's happening in your life and individualize a treatment plan for you. It's not a cookie cutter, okay, you're here for, you're here to get, this is exactly what every person coming through here is going to do. If, either partner has been diagnosed with any health concerns, so like autoimmunity can be a big one when it comes to having concerns with fertility. So if you have been diagnosed with something like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, any GI issues like Crohn's or colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, any of these autoimmune conditions can unfortunately make it more challenging to conceive. So, working with a naturopath can help to, get antibody levels down to help bring down the inflammation. Inflammatory and immune play a huge role when it comes to conception. So if you do have any health concerns like that, getting those under control before you want to try to get pregnant can make the journey a lot simpler for you.
Dr. Jodie, as we sort of wrap things up, and for our audience out there who, are considering or already on their journey to conception, what are any final words you would like to leave with them?
Yeah, so I would say there are some great resources available to help. And I mean, the internet can be such an amazing tool, and it can be such a detrimental resource when you're on a journey like this, right? So definitely, if you're relying on the internet for your information, make sure the source that you're getting things from is research based, is giving you, a lot of times I'll find, when you get on support forums, for example, like, and especially in the fertility realm, like, I can't tell you how many people have come back and said, well, I went on the forum and so-and-so said like all they needed to do was take a inositol and now they're pregnant. Like, should I take a inositol? Like, I'm taking it now. Let's, check your sources. And I mean, nobody's doing that out of, maliciousness or anything like that, but each individual is different, right? So what works for one person isn't necessarily going to be the best bet for somebody else, right? So check your resources, make sure that you're getting reputable information. I do have a book called Preconceived that's available either on our website, Enhanced Fertility, or through Amazon. It basically is a really nice kind of starting guide. It's laid out. The chapters are only 3 to 4 pages each, with kind of take homes from a lifestyle standpoint of things you can start to think about and implement at home. And then I find, if you start with that, then go in to see your naturopathic doctor who can then run the blood work and kind of, you can hone in on what you think is most important for you, or, exercise. You got that, that's no problem, but you need help with your diet, or those are good, but you're struggling with PCOS. Like, so that I find is just kind of a nice starting place that then you can use as a springboard to then go in to see your naturopath to fine tune things for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jodie. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think you've definitely given a lot for the couples out there to think about and possibly, start to incorporate on their journey. please follow Dr. Jodie on Instagram or Facebook at Enhanced Fertility. And as she's mentioned, she has her book out, so you can buy that on enhancedfertility.ca or check it out on Amazon. All of this information will be listed down below and also on our social media platforms. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get updates of further Fireside chats with Naturopaths. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much and have a great day.